This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by Italiancitizenshipassistance.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. How you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And of course, today we wanted to get into a topic that might be a little bit tricky and maybe get into some things that are a little bit more opinion-based and some things that are definitely rooted in law. And the first thing is because regarding the question, can Jure Sanguinis be canceled? I think there's two ways to actually interpret this question. I think it would be great if we can get into both interpretations of that question. Firstly, can the legal principle of Jure Sanguinis be canceled in Italy? Can it be changed? Can it be modified? Can it be completely written out of the law books? And then the other interpretation of the question is somebody who's got citizenship through Jure Sanguinis, can they actually lose their citizenship? So maybe let's go with the one that's maybe a little bit more scary and a little bit more opinion-based. And I'll just tell you guys now, don't be worried. But Marco, well, maybe it might be worthwhile answering, why should people not be worried about Jure Sanguinis, the legal principle, being canceled?
That's a very interesting question. And, we get this question from time to time from our clients, especially when the government changes, when we have a new prime minister, which in Italy happens more frequently maybe than in other countries. So they ask us, maybe because they are in the process, they're gathering documents with us or by themselves, they're waiting for the consulate to process their citizenship, or they are waiting for the court to grant them citizenship, and they ask us, well, now that we have a new government in Italy, or that we're going to have new elections, or whatever the reason may be, they ask us, is it possible that the law regulating Jure Sanguinis is canceled? And the answer is, in theory, it's probably possible, but it's extremely unlikely. And regardless, it would not affect people who, at the present time, are alive. People that are alive when the potential and very unlikely change will come into effect. And the reason is a very specific legal reason, meaning that the Jure Sanguinis principle that we have in the Italian law, it's not a principle that basically awards citizenship to certain individuals. And the reason is a very simple legal reason, which would be the Jure Sanguinis principle is not a principle that awards citizenship to certain individuals that deserve citizenship. Rather, it gives the ability for people to be retroactively recognized as Italian citizens, or in other words, to have their birth status recognized retroactively. So what I'm saying is, people who qualify for citizenship Jure Sanguinis, which means by right of blood, are already Italian citizens without knowing it. They just want to have their status recognized by the Italian government. By an Italian consulate if they're applying through the consulate, or by an Italian municipality if they're applying through an Italian municipality. So these people, they were born with Italian citizenship because citizenship was passed to them from their parent, who got it from their parent, who got it from their parents. So it's something that has already happened, and even a potential change in the law, which, like I said, is extremely unlikely, and I will say why in a second. But even if the law that regulates Jure Sanguinis in Italy changed, it wouldn't change the fact that somebody who is alive now and who has the right to obtain citizenship Jure Sanguinis already had citizenship Jure Sanguinis in the moment in which this person was born. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whenever this person was born. So that's why even if a very unlikely change in the law would not affect somebody who already was born with this status and is just going through a process to have the Italian government, through the Italian consulate or an Italian municipality or an Italian court, recognize their birth status. Now, why do I say that a change is unlikely? Because we're talking about a principle that is so basic. A lot of people believe that they are eligible for Italian citizenship Jure Sanguinis thanks to a very complex set of laws, but instead it's just one simple basic principle that says that the son or the daughter of an Italian citizen is automatically recognized as an Italian citizen at birth, which is the same principle that regulates the acquisition of Italian citizenship now at the present time for somebody who is born now to Italian parents. So this principle never changed over the course of the years. And it was the same 100 years ago, meaning that 100 years ago, as well as today, somebody whose parent, at least one parent, was an Italian citizen at the time of their birth, acquires Italian citizenship at birth automatically through descent, Jure Sanguinis, by right of blood, meaning because you are related to the person who gave birth to you. So that's how you acquire citizenship in Italy now, and how you acquired citizenship in Italy 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when your ancestors were born, when the people in your Italian line were born, which is why now you qualify for Italian citizenship by descent. So you qualify because your great-grandfather was an Italian citizen when he gave birth to your grandfather, and your grandfather, who became an Italian at birth, was an Italian citizen when your father or mother was born. So he or she was born with Italian citizenship, which means that your mom or dad, an Italian citizen, passed citizenship on to you, and you were born at the time of your birth as an Italian citizen. So that principle that says that you were born as an Italian citizen now allows you to apply for recognition of that birth status, which never happened. That recognition never happened because your parents never registered your birth certificate in Italy. But now you can go through this process to have retroactively acknowledged and recognized by the Italian government that you were born as an Italian citizen.
That's a very big deal right there, to know that there is theoretically that level of security for especially those people already born. And I mean, I think even you didn't quite get into exactly, but we've already seen with some thing like 1948 cases, and we can see from the way that people are making these claims that these things are already set up as is. And so another question, just because sometimes Jure Sanguinis and Jus Soli are brought up in the same breath, I think very unfortunately, but I think at the same time, because they are so often done that in the political sphere, that it is worthwhile at least getting into that topic very briefly. Do you ever see Jus Soli, the birthright citizenship, ever becoming part of what you might see in Italy, or part of a way of acquiring Italian citizenship?
I'm very glad you brought that up, because actually that in Italy, we don't really have the principle of Jus Soli, except in very rare circumstances, meaning if somebody was born in Italy to stateless or unknown parents, in which case you become an Italian citizen because you were born on the Italian territory. But otherwise, you don't become an Italian citizen by being born in Italy. You become an Italian citizen because you were born to Italian parents at the time, who were Italian citizens at the time of your birth, as opposed to what happens in Canada or the US, where you become a citizen of those countries because you were born there, regardless of the citizenship of your parents at the time of your birth. So there have been talks over the years about introducing to some extent the principle of Jus Soli in Italy, meaning that some people are going to become Italian citizens, people that fall into some categories because they were born in Italy, but that never came into effect. That was never finalized by any government. There were only talks so far about introducing that principle in the Italian legal system, which was never introduced. But like I said, that's a principle that currently works in the US and Canada, meaning that in those countries you acquire citizenship because you were born there. And that's one of the reasons why, going back to what I was saying before, why a change in the way in which citizenship is transferred in Italy, meaning under the current rules, it's transferred Jure Sanguinis by right of blood, is extremely unlikely because we don't have any alternatives. And the only alternative would be to introduce the principle of jus soli in place of the Jure Sanguinis principle, which it's very unlikely that happens. The Jure Sanguinis principle has been operating in Italy for hundreds of years, and it's actually the principle that regulates the transfer of citizenship in many European countries. So it's very unlikely that the Jure Sanguinis principle will be dropped in favor of the maybe jus soli principle. Now, so that's why the change is extremely unlikely. But even if in the extremely unlikely event that this government or one of the next governments will say, okay, we don't want the Jure Sanguinis rules anymore in Italy. We want to replace them with the jus soli rules. That change would only affect people that are born after the change. So people that are born in 2022 or 2023 or 2024. So all of the people that were born before the change, the month before, the year before, 10 years before, would still qualify for recognition of their Italian citizenship that they obtained at birth through their parents. So through the Jure Sanguinis principle. So that's why I said before, even if a change is extremely unlikely, even if it happened, it would only affect people born after the law changed and not people who were alive when the law changed.
That's really interesting. And I'm just curious, though, do you, from a personal opinion, from your professional opinion, see any potential for the two to be able to coexist in Italy? Or do you see things really not changing anytime in the near future?
So, of course, there have been talks about having the two principles coexisting in Italy, which is a possibility. They coexist in some other legal systems. For example, in the US, citizenship is acquired by birth in the US, but as an exception to that rule, people who are born outside of the US to American citizen parents, they become citizens of the US jure sanguinis, so by right of blood. So the two systems can coexist. Whether or not we will ever see the jus soli principle in Italy, that I can't really say. I'm inclined to say that probably not. We will not see it ever, just because of the political system that we have in Italy, where there are parties that are very much opposed to this principle to be present in the Italian legal system.
Yeah, I think maybe just while we're quickly on that topic, it might be worth mentioning, of course, this is no endorsement of any political party or any politicians or any direction of political leanings, but it's been interesting to notice where these discussions have come from, just from a historic point, from where, if people are interested in looking at what's going on in Italy. I know right after this recent election, I got a number of emails and private messages, people saying, oh no, what's going to happen? Is Jure Sanguinis going to change? Are we going to see any problems? And from the majority, if not all of the times I've ever heard the topic be brought up about jus soli in Italy, it's always seemed to come from parties that were either center left to far left. And all of the arguments coming in favor of jure sanguinis, would be anywhere from center right to far right. So that's also, I think, interesting that it falls under those sorts of categories, which for, I know a lot of people, it might be a little bit of a surprise. And even the current Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, She put out a video. I don't know if it was on the Palazzo Chigi. I almost doubt it was on their YouTube channel, but I know she put out a piece of content specifically saying that it was her priority, or her, this is not a direct quote, of course, but it was, she had no intentions of seeing anything change, and it was her position that she wanted to protect the rights of Italian citizens around the world, regardless of where they were born, in favor strongly of Jure Sanguinis, which I thought personally was very interesting and was a bit surprised to hear. But of course, again, this is not an endorsement of any politician, political party, political leanings. This is just talking about some things that we've seen over the years and maybe where they've been coming from, just to try to stay kind of fair and balanced within this discussion about where things have been coming from. But anyway, leaving that all aside, just maybe before we get into if a person can lose their citizenship once they've already gained it via Jure Sanguinis, one other question that I have for you, just if you wouldn't mind maybe to cover quickly, how functionally does Jure Sanguinis work? How is it that a person can make a claim through their great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent, great-great-great-great-great, however many greats, as long as the documents exist? How is it possible for that person to make a claim for Italian citizenship?
That's a very interesting question. A lot of people ask me that. So they ask me, but how is it possible that I can claim citizenship by right of blood through a distant ancestor? Is it just because we are related by blood? Is there something else? And the answer is yes, there is something else. So it's not sufficient to be related by blood to one of your ancestors. And by the way, it goes without saying that you cannot claim citizenship from somebody that is not in your direct Italian line. So if you have like a sibling or somebody else, like some other relative, a cousin who is an Italian citizen, of course you cannot claim citizenship through them. It needs to be one of your ascendants or ancestors, somebody who you are related to directly. So it needs to be a direct link between you and your Italian-born ancestor. And the way it works is that the Italian-born ancestor is basically the key. So the person who left Italy and went to America. So what you have to do is you have to gather documents to prove that your ancestor who was born in Italy either never became an American citizen or became an American citizen through naturalization after their child was born in America. And that's because with the naturalization, the ancestor who emigrated lost their Italian citizenship. So it's important that this loss happened after the birth of their child in America, or that it never happened at all. And if that's the case, the child who was born in America got Italian citizenship by descent, so through blood from the parent who emigrated from Italy. And once that person became an Italian by descent, by right of blood, then that person was born as a dual citizen, basically an American and an Italian, and could pass Italian citizenship on to the next generation, the grandfather in this example, who also passed it to the father or mother of the person who passed it to the person itself, the applicant for Italian citizenship. So you have to prove that you have an unbroken line and that citizenship was passed from your ancestor who was born in Italy down to you without interruptions. So you're not claiming citizenship directly from that ancestor, but rather you're proving that that ancestor passed citizenship on to the next generation who passed it on to you. So you need to prove through the documents that you need to gather and present to the consulate or the Italian municipality or the Italian court, depending on where you are applying. You need to prove that you have an unbroken line and the citizenship was passed from one person to the other in your Italian line from your ancestor down to you.
Well, thank you so much, Marco, for clarifying that and how this actually works. And just to move on to the other topic, that the other interpretation of this question, if Jure Sanguinis can be canceled. If a person goes through the process, their delayed birth registration, goes through the whole thing, going through generation to generation, has their citizenship officially recognized, can their citizenship at any point after the fact be canceled?
That's a very good question. A lot of people contact me with concerns about that. And of course, there's nothing to be worried about because citizenship cannot be canceled or lost in any way unless, of course, you voluntarily decide to give it up, which is something that the Italian law allows. But otherwise, the Italian government is not going to take your citizenship from you. And, a lot of people, they have this idea that the citizenship that they're acquiring by descent, it's somewhat different from the citizenship that they have, their original citizenship that was given to them in the country where they were born, or that it's different from the citizenship that somebody who was born in Italy has. But it's the same thing. So it's the same. It's at the same level. It's a full citizenship. It's not something different. So you are recognized as a full citizen of Italy, exactly as somebody who was born in Italy to Italian parents, somebody who never lived anywhere else, somebody like myself. I was born in Italy. So all of my clients that use ICA to get citizenship by descent will become an Italian citizen, and they will acquire my same status or your status. Rafael, you became an Italian citizen, Jure Sanguinis too. And the same way in which they cannot lose their American citizenship, if we're talking, of course, American-born people who petitioned to become Italians, they cannot lose Italian citizenship, so the government will not take it from them if, for example, they don't reside in Italy, if they fail to renew it. Some people believe that they have to renew it every once in a while, every number of years, but there's no such thing. You don't have to renew your citizenship. You just hold it forever, unless you renounce it, of course. The thing that you have to renew is your Italian passport, which you may or may not want to renew, which you may or may not want to have. The Italian passport is just a travel document. So some people are American citizens without ever having applied for a U.S. passport. And that's the same with Italian citizenship. You can become an Italian citizen, Jure Sanguinis, without ever requesting an Italian passport. That's totally fine. You don't have to do it unless you want to. Of course, most people do request it because it's a very useful travel document that gives you access to a lot of countries. But you don't lose citizenship if you don't request an Italian passport, or if you fail to renew your Italian passport. Of course, if you don't renew your Italian passport every 10 years, you won't be able to use it because you need a valid passport to travel. But with that being said, citizenship cannot be taken from you once you get it.
Well, again, thank you so much, Marco, for explaining how that all works and also explaining that it in fact can't be canceled because of the way that it's recognized, because you're born with the citizenship. I think, again, that's always a huge point, in that we all recognize or understand that citizenship by descent means through your family, but not necessarily everybody who's going through this, especially at the beginning, will understand that there is that extra special detail that if you are already eligible, that means you already technically are a citizen. It's just you're going through the process of recognition of that citizenship. But anyway, Marco, if anybody is needing the help of you or your team to get their citizenship by descent or through marriage or whatever it may be, how can they get in contact with you guys?
People can contact us through our website, ItalianCitizenshipassistance.com, or give us a call. Our number is on our website.
Well, that is fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in more content about Italian citizenship, Italian dual citizenship, make sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel and the audio-only podcast. But of course, being subscribed to the YouTube channel means you're also automatically subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, another podcast that Marco and I collaborate on, where we talk a little bit more about Italian real estate, purchasing in Italy, renting in Italy, where we would want to live in Italy, and all of those related topics. A lot of great information in there, if I do say so myself. So anyway, thank you again so much, Marco, for making yourself available for another episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.